Revelation chapter 11 today, and thank you everybody for coming out. This is going to be one of those interesting lessons. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I started watching. Because of the way the week was, I couldn't get started. You know, we're having company coming in, and so Lori's got a little anxiety about making sure everything's nice, and I understand that. I don't falter that. So we were busy trying to get stuff done, and so we were painting the deck on Friday, God, it took both of us 4 hours to paint that deck, and we didn't do the floor. It's just all those little stupid little spindles, you know, just like, man. But anyway, so I didn't get to usually I start my preparation on Friday. I watch all the videos and then pick it up on Saturday and finish it. But I had to wait until yesterday to start my videos, and I go, okay, you know, I gotta watch Chuck Missler, I gotta watch Tom Bradford, and I gotta watch Mark Carell. So I watched Mark Carell, and then I got to Tom Bradford, and Tom Bradford used 2.5 sessions to do chapter 11. That's like 2.5 hours. And I'm like, I guess I'm not getting to Chuck today because there's no way. So there's just a lot of stuff here. And if you read through chapter 11, you would go, okay, yeah, there's some stuff I don't get, but I mean, the stuff that's in here is just unbelievable. And I hope I'm just really trusting that God's going to help me remember the stuff that you need to know, because there's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to get left out, unfortunately. So, if you recall, we were, I should turn that off. China's rogue rocket crashed to Earth late last night. Here's where it hit. Did anybody get hit by it?
No.
Oh, good. Okay. I was concerned that some of you weren't going to be here because it was sitting in your driveway. We're kind of changing a little bit the direction a little bit from last week from chapter 10, and again, one of the things that we have to remember, it's crucial especially for Revelation. It's true of all the books of the Bible, but remember, keep it always at the forefront of your mind that when the Bible was written, there were no chapters and verses. And so sometimes, not sometimes, but these breaks between chapters are arbitrary. Some guy thought, okay, this thought's done, we're going to start a new one. You know, when we read in the Western culture, when we read a book, we finish one chapter, that chapter ends a certain event or certain topic, right? And you go to the next chapter, and it picks up someplace else or further down the road or whatever. So we have that mindset when we go in and read the Bible that that's exactly what's happening. And that it's not necessarily the case. Because again, these chapters are totally arbitrary. All right, so sometimes you'll find things, and we've done lessons where we started with the last verse of the previous chapter and said, really, this should be with this chapter. And so we're going to see that again and again and again in Revelation as well. So sometimes when we see these breaks, we think, okay, there's been a little bit of a break. They've taken 5. Now they're going to come back, and the next thing's going to happen. And that, again, that's not necessarily what's taking place. But in Revelation 11, we're going to talk briefly about the temple, and then we're going to talk about the 2 witnesses. All right, everybody know about the 2 witnesses? Mm-hmm. There were 2 of them.
What? No way.
Yeah, I know, it's hard to believe. That's not symbolic, it was literal. Anyway, we're chapter 11, verses 1 and 2. Then there was given to me a measuring rod like a staff, and someone said, get up and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship in it. Leave out the courtyard which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, because it has been given to the nations, and they will trample the holy city for 42 months. Okay? Everybody got that? Okay, we can move on. Just kidding. So I've got some things underlined in here. And the first thing that's being dealt with here is the temple. Now, we don't know what this 3rd temple is going to look like. Or obviously they're talking about the 3rd one. Who's going to build the 3rd temple? The Antichrist is going to be involved in building this 3rd temple. How many temples were there before this one?
2.
Very good. The first one was Solomon's. The second one was Herod's. And then the third one will basically become the Antichrist's. Okay? Most likely, this will be modeled after Herod's temple. Okay? Now, Herod's temple was a little different from Solomon's temple. Solomon's temple truly was built for worshiping God. It was meant to be a holy place where you would worship. Herod took it and bumped it up a notch. It took him 45 years. When Nebuchadnezzar conquered Israel, he destroyed the temple. Okay? And so it wasn't really rebuilt until Herod came along. And Herod decides he's going to build this spectacular thing. And it takes him, well, it didn't really take him. It took 45 years to build what he wanted to put in that place. Okay? So this was a massive, massive undertaking. And this temple under Herod could best be described as the Disneyland of the ancient world. We'll see what the plan was like, but the idea was that this was considered not one of the ancient seven wonders of the ancient world, but it was a pretty impressive piece of construction. And so he wanted people to come and stand and look and be impressed. Okay, so one of the things that he added to his temple was the court of Gentiles. That was a place where the Gentiles could go and kind of look and watch and see what was going on and be oohed and awed by what was happening. The original temple did not have this. The temple was strictly for Jews, no Gentiles allowed. But Herod decides he wants to impress the world, so he makes this court of Gentiles where they can go and see what's going on and kind of watch what's going on. So in the verse here it says, get up and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship in it. So what's taking place here is first of all, we don't know what this rod is. We don't know how long it is. We don't know really, is it just a reed? Is it just the idea of using, you would use a rod in the ancient time to measure distance, right? So maybe it's just, it's symbolic of count how many people are there in the temple. So what this rod's being used to measure are the Jews, because they would be in the temple. Okay? But the voice tells him to ignore those outside the temple, because that's where the Gentiles are. That's where the non-believers are. Okay? Now, when this third temple is built, there's going to be a court of Gentiles. And we're going to take a look at that here in a minute. So, and that's what it means. That's what the speaker means when he says it's been given to the nations. Okay, the temple is for the Jews. Outside of that area is given to the non-Jews, the goyim, or we call them Gentiles. Okay, now before we move forward with the temple, we're going to have a little fun topic discussion on time. Okay. So the first thing we see here is that they will trample the holy city for 42 months. So this temple that's going to be built is going to be so spectacular that it's going to be a tourist attraction in Jerusalem. People are going to come from all over the world to look at this thing. And so what's going to happen is that these Gentiles will trample Jerusalem. And trampling is just another way of, it's not a good thing. It's defiled, it's to run down. So this temple is going to be so amazing that people all over the world are going to come to look at it. And Jerusalem's going to be overrun with Gentiles coming to see this temple. So the first thing we see here is the 42 months. Now I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because we have this measurement, 42 months. We also have 3.5 years, and then we'll also have 1,260 days. Okay? These are all the same thing, right? 42 months equals 3.5 years. 3.5 years is 3.5 years. 1,260 days equals 3.5 years. Or does it?
I'm checking.
1,260 days, if I divide it by 12, no, is that what I want to do? No, days would be 506.
365.
If I take this, I have to determine how long it is. Is it 3.5 years? Because these three things are used to talk about the same length of time. Okay? Now, typically, does anybody have an idea of what we say the month, let's see. Before I get too far here, let me back up just a second. Well, it's going to be more in a second, but the Jews used a lunar year, whereas they measured their year by the phases of the moon. Okay? The problem with that is there's also a thing called the solar year. The solar year is based on how long it takes us to get from point A around the sun and back to point A. Or if you're a flat earther, from the time it takes the sun to go from point A around the earth and back to point A. At any rate, it's the cycle of the sun. Guess what? These two do not match up. The solar year and the lunar year are not the same length of time. Okay, so there's a problem. And the problem is this. If you're an agricultural society, your year is going to be based on the sun, not the moon, right? The sun is what your plants need. They don't need the moon. The seasons are based on the what? The sun, right? Okay. And here's the other thing. Feasts are also based on the solar year. Okay? Everybody with me so far? Okay. Rabbit hole hasn't gotten too deep. So they've got to come up with a way to rectify those two things. And so they stayed with the lunar year, but had to make adjustments every year because it wouldn't come out. Now the question is, how many days, if I want to make an equal calendar, how many days would that take? Well, if I take the day and divide it, it comes out to my month here would be 29.5 days.
Even February?
Every month is 29.5. Well, why do we make February 28 days? Because every 4 years we have to add one. Because we get behind. It's really, we're missing a quarter of a day. So even with the solar year, you have to make an adjustment. But when you're dealing with the rest of the world and they're on solar, you've got to be able to adjust your calendar. Because here's what happens. If I stay on lunar and I just keep going lunar and lunar and lunar and lunar, at some point I'm going to lose a massive amount of time because I'm losing days every year. And so either I have to make adjustments, and they did that all the time, because there were certain dates that these festivals these feasts had to take place on, and the only way you could guarantee that was if you made adjustments to your calendar. So they would even have, at some points, they would have an extra month that they would add on to get the year caught back up. Sounds kind of wonky, I know, but that's just the way they did it. So, okay, now we got a problem. We're going to have to celebrate. Every month's going to be 29.5. Well, we haven't figured out a way to celebrate half a day. So, how do you do it? Well, here's how you do it. You have 6 months of 30 and 6 months of 29. The average of 30 and 29 will come out to be 29.5. So they would do 1 month 30, then 29, 30, then 29, 30, then 29. Okay? So that's how they were dealing with it. And then just throw an extra couple days here and there to make sure everything took place. Now, the one thing I did leave out here was the times, time, times, and half times. Okay? Now the problem is, again, is that this number here doesn't really match what the calendar was that the Jews used. So we can't say it's based on 30 days a month because that's not what the Jews had. Now I guess apparently when they went to Babylon, they adopted a 30-day calendar because that's what the Babylonians used. So we've got this number here that is kind of, it's kind of close, but it's not exactly. So if you take 29 and a half and multiply it by 3.5, I don't think you get 1,260. My science teacher's gonna figure that out for us. I thought you were doing your calculator.
Oh, I do have my calculator.
Okay, well what does it equal?
Oh, well, hold on, I didn't put that in there. I
Uh-oh.
was looking at the lunar versus solar year and
Oh.
what the days are. Anyway, okay.
Were the
I put
people,
you on the spot, I'm sorry.
are the people that are on lunar, is that where the term loonies come from?
Probably.
Oh.
Yeah, and you know, Bugs Bunny was really a lunar tune.
So it's 29.5 times 3.5 years.
It's gonna have a 5 in it, I know. I know that much.
Hold on.
Gail probably has it in her head already. No?
Okay, so if I do 29.5 times the 42 months, then that's 1,239 days.
Okay. Okay, what about 3.5 times, I guess 3.5 years, you'd have to do, not really 3.5 times 29.5, it would have to be, you have to do 12, right? So don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it, it's just not worth it. You can all do that at home on your own. Go ahead.
Yeah, I did do 1,260
Divided by,
divided by 365, and that came out to be 3.45 years.
okay.
And then I also did, like the lunar calendar, it says that it's about 354 days for a
Right.
year,
Yeah,
and that came out to be 3.55 years.
okay.
So it was either a little bit less
Okay.
or a little bit more.
Okay, now, thank you. The whole point of this is what? Greg just wants us to be smarter? Well, partly. But the whole point is that these are not the same amount. And yet they're used interchangeably as the same amount, or at least that's the way we translate it. 3.5, 3.5. So if they don't equal the same amount, why are they in there? Well, they gotta be in there for a reason, okay? This one being written out is most likely more of a, not necessarily speaking exactly of 3.5, but speaking of a general length of time. Okay, it's more of a symbolic time period than it is an exact 3.5, okay? Because it's words, it's not numbers. Whereas these are numbers.
So does that mean that it's like I don't know what that means then, to be a general amount of time?
Well, what if I said, I was supposed to come to your house for dinner and I call and say, hey, I'm running late, I'll be there in a couple of hours. That could be anywhere from an hour and a half to 2.5 hours. I mean, it's my way of saying I'm a ways off.
See in a couple of days.
Okay.
So,
It's still kind of an unknown amount?
yeah, there's just some, this isn't the same as saying, I'm gonna be there in 1 hour, 25 minutes, and 36 seconds. It's more getting a ballpark type thing, okay? And then the issue here is, what calendar do we use? The calendar at that time could have been lunar, and it could have been solar. So we don't know. He's a Jewish person writing to Jewish people. would he have written with the lunar calendar in mind as opposed to the, and if he uses the lunar, that's not gonna equal 3.5 years, right? We already saw that. And if we use the solar, it doesn't equal 3.5 years.
Right.
Okay? And then the 42 months, does that mean at the end of the 42nd month? Is it once you get into the 42nd month? Is it halfway through the 42nd month? So the point here is that these are giving us times to kind of deal with, and if we really, we're probably safer if we look at it this way. 3.5 is half of 7, right? What does the number 7 show, mean in the Bible?
Perfection.
Perfection, right? So this is the number of perfection. So half of perfection would be
Imperfect.
incomplete. So basically, I mean, without getting hung up on trying to figure out what day a month and all that kind of stuff this is, and that's the problem that we get into when we start seeing numbers. We as Western thinkers, we want to try and figure out what day this is going to be and what hour. And then we're probably better off going, all this is saying is that somewhere halfway between 0 and the seventh year, this is going to all happen. And it could be half like this as opposed to, as opposed to this little point right there. And that's kind of what we tend to think, isn't it? We've got here, year 1 starts here, year 7 here, and right there, that little point right there is when everything changes. There's very little in this world that happens like in one point. It's all kind of blends in and blends out. Make sense? Okay? So we're probably better off thinking about it in this sense, is that at some point in that 7-year period, probably halfway through, something's going to happen to take us to that perfection, the 7-year period. Okay? You're like, why the heck did he have to talk about that?
No. So I have another question before you completely erase everything.
Okay.
So is the 7 years a general term too?
Well, again, it could be.
Okay.
It doesn't say at the end of the 7-year period or the last day. It doesn't say the last day of the 7-year period. There's just a sense of there's going to be a point where there's perfection. And I think until something else is revealed to us, and one of the things that we've known as we've gone through Revelation is we know things in the year 2021 that 200 years ago people would have had no clue. They would have had no clue. What is he talking about? But we're like, oh yeah, we're going to talk about something today. Oh yeah, I can see very easily how this could happen. And so, as Tom Bradford, I didn't include this slide, but he had a picture of a flower going from a bud to opening up. And that's the way the Bible is, and Revelation especially is that as we get closer to that time when the flower opens up, we begin to be able to understand more and more and more and more. So I think until we reach a point where we can definitely say this, and this gets us to the same point. And it makes more sense, especially if you're looking at these numbers don't match up. They don't speak of the same amount of time. Did that answer your question? Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody else?
You know, this math, I was great at math. I'm 64 now with dementia, so I'm lost.
You're lost.
It's interesting, but I can't.
Well, I'm
follow.
teaching it and I'm lost, so.
That's one thing. But I relate it to, times have to do with seasons.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a story of a man who was trying to teach his sons, so he sent them all in a different season to see this tree. And they all come back, and he said, tell me what you saw. One said, man, it was the most beautiful springtime. It was beautiful with fruit on it. And other said it was dead. Another said, well, it was green, but no fruit. And he said, you're looking at that tree in a different season.
Mm-hmm.
And he was trying to teach him about when you look at a man, you're only seeing him in a season. You're not seeing the man. So I just love it that the Bible says that the spirits of righteous men, we talk about this process that where we become born again, and then it's a process.
Right.
And then it says, then the spirits, when we pass, the spirits of righteous men will be made perfect. So it's just a season
Mhm.
of time. So that fits somewhere in all this.
Well,
I can't
actually,
figure-
it does, that's a great point, thanks for sharing that times are used for seasons. That when they use that term, it's talking about season, it's not talking about a year or a year and a half or whatever.
And every man's time is numbered.
Right.
So every man doesn't die, and that process isn't the same for that man.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it
No,
was
you-
just interesting, so that's
Well,
all I
you-
need to say about it.
Well, you did a great job of saying whatever it was you were.
Yeah, I
trying
don't
to
even
say.
know what the point was.
No, I think it's a good point. I mean, and I think that's the thing we have to think about is that as we go through that tribulation period, there are going to be seasons, and things are going to happen that are going to be different, that are going to be based on what took place before. And we've already seen that in some of the judgments. It's not like, the first thing happens, and then that's like in a vacuum. Then the second thing happens, and that's in a vacuum. The third thing happens, and that's in a vacuum. And has no connection with what happened before. These things build on each other, and they overlap. And it's not just like, okay, Monday we had this, and then Friday this came, and then next Wednesday this is going to come. It's all kind of bundled up, but there's a focus on something. And so I think that the idea of the seasons, and as I said, Tom Bradford, he brought up that point about how times represents seasons. It's not a specific, like a year type thing. Okay?
Speaking, I mean, when he's talking, he doesn't say, well, I woke up Sunday morning and I saw this. And that was over on Tuesday.
Right.
And then I waited 6 days. I mean, it was just, there's no time. It's all general.
Well, why is there no time? You're right. You're totally right. But why is there no time? Because he's in heaven.
Amen.
There's no time in heaven.
Amen.
And again, 200 years ago, I could have said that to a Sunday school class, and they would look at me like, his wife needs to take him to the doctor. He's kind of wacky. They would have 200 years ago, they would not have had any concept of the idea that there is a dimension where time doesn't play a part. It just is. So, and again, that's one of those things we have to remember is we're trying to, this is part of this problem with these interludes or these breaks that we see in these judgments, is that they aren't necessarily like hard breaks. Like we have the sixth trumpet, and okay, now there's this big old long thing where the speaker goes, whoever it is, goes, okay, John, we're gonna give you a chance to catch up. We know we had a lot of stuff here. We're gonna go get some coffee, and then when you get done writing everything else you saw, we'll come back and we'll continue. This is stuff that's all kind of going on at the same time. And he's trying his best to try and collect all this information. I mean, you just can imagine being in that situation where he's being expected to write everything. Imagine this, that you were a sports writer and you were told to write an article on a football game, but you were expected to write about every single player on every single play. And you're there in the midst of it, and you can't go back and watch a video. You gotta do it in real time. I mean, you would be spending the timeouts going, okay, the guy, going back and making sure everything. And that's kind of the situation John is here. He's being expected to record all this stuff, but as a human, he only has a facility to handle so much information.
You can't comprehend what's going on.
Well, and that's the other thing is that he's spending a lot of time trying to come up with adjectives and words to describe what it is he's seeing, because isn't it what he saw when he was back on Patmos, right? So, anyway, we're going to go on to verse 3. And I skipped all these. Maybe I should have not skipped them. But, and here just, again, this is the calendar, the lunar calendar. And you can see that this is, that the months are set up so it's 30, 29, 30, 29 to get that lunar year. Okay? And you may not be able to see it that well, but I just wanted you to see that this is an actual calendar that was used. I mean, obviously, this isn't actual, I'm just saying it's a depiction of what was actually used. Okay, I don't know. All right, so the other thing that we have to know about these numbers, remember this word? Chiasm? We've talked about it before. Remember the 7 churches? I'll throw this up in here because this should be in the back of your mind. Chiasm is the, like say, B, A, B, where you have a point here, go to the next point, then you repeat that point, and then repeat that point. It's like a mirror image, okay? It's a mirror image. And, or it could be A, B, B, A. What?
But it was 7 before.
Right, I just didn't want to go out that, it gets the same idea across, okay? All right, so again, when we look at these numbers, and this is where I was talking about how the chapter and verses prevents us from seeing some of this stuff. Chiasm, again, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, was a writing standard. I don't know if standard's the right word or not, but they used the Jews used it a lot in their writing to make a point. It also helped them with memorization. Okay, and so the example here is that, like I said, it's like A, B, B, A, or B, whatever you want to do it, and we use this all the time. And as you can see the 2 examples up here, examples of chiasm in our vocabulary is the going gets tough and the tough get going. Okay, so going and tough and then tough and going. The same with by failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. Those are examples of chiasm. Okay, and again, it was something the Jews used quite often. So what we have here is that when we look at the numbers, I'll just show this to you. Don't accept my. That was weird. All right, so we've got this chiasm here with these dates, with these numberings. So if we say A is 42, B is 1260, and C is 3.5, we see those in that order in chapter 11. Okay? If when we read through, you'll see that the first thing we talked about was what? 42 months. And then the next thing will be 1,260 days. The next thing will be 3.5 years. Now, then we see numbers again, and it's going to be 3.5, 1,260, and 42. But what's interesting here is that not just the numbers are chiasm, but the words are as well. So when 42 is mentioned the first time, it's for months. The second time it's mentioned, it's going to be for months as well. The 1260, the first time is days, and then 1260 is days, 3.5 is days, and then 3.5 is days. So 3.5 could be years, or it could be years. Okay? So that's all that we're seeing here, is that they're there for a reason to help people remember what's taking place. And if you say that they're all kind of the same length of time, it kind of helps with the memorization process. Okay? Yes, no? All right, now let's go talk about the temple real quickly. As you can see here, this is Herod's temple, and this is the part where they were being measured. It was up there where the most holy place, the holy place, and the altar. Those were the things that were being measured. All right, that area. You got the Gentiles' court out here and the temple court over here. So the Gentiles' court would be where the Gentiles would go, anybody who wasn't Jewish. Now, looking to the future, how is this going to lay out? One of the things when we deal with the temple is, where will the new temple be? Well, we know it'll be in Jerusalem, right? But where in Jerusalem? Okay. And that's not necessarily 100% agreement on that. There are people who believe that this really isn't the Temple Mount that we think is the Temple Mount. It's not really the Temple Mount. That building there was not the temple. It was a Roman. It's where the Roman soldiers stayed. The Temple Mount's actually a different location. I don't know. I'm not going there today, So there's, you know, like everything else in Revelation, there's discussion, there's difference of opinions. Okay, so what's on the Temple Mount right now?
Dome of the Rock.
Dome.
And another Muslim temple.
Right, Dome of the Rock and a Muslim temple. Okay? So somehow, the Jews are going to be able to build their temple under the aegis of the Antichrist on the Dome of the Rock. How many of you think that the Muslims are going to give up that territory? Okay, so the Antichrist has to come up with a way for that to happen and keep them, you know, keep the Jews happy and let them build their temple and keep the Muslims happy as well. Now, if you think about this as being, you're looking straight at it, and the east gate is down here. The east gate's important. The temple would have faced the east gate, okay? And the east gate would have been opened, and that's, you know, the east represents where Christ comes and all that stuff. Ever since the Muslims took over Jerusalem, the east gate has been blocked up. Any guesses why they would block it up? So Jesus can't come back.
Yeah.
That's exactly why. And they will not let anybody open it up. Okay? So
They mustn't believe.
So you've got the Gentile court over here, right? Okay, here's a photograph of the Temple Mount. There's the Dome of the Rock, and over here off the picture, it's very grainy. Off to the left here is their temple, where supposedly Muhammad hitched a ride on a flying horse up to heaven. Okay? This spot right here, think about this. Right here is the east gate. All right? So if this is the east gate, where's the temple need to go? Right there in that empty spot. Okay? So if he gets that approved, this is what it's going to look like, or could look like. Where is the Dome of the Rock?
Right next to it.
In the court of the Gentiles.
Yes. It would be in the court of the Gentiles. Right? Let's go back to this. There's your temple. To the left of that temple is the Gentiles' court. They were not counted because they don't believe in God. They don't believe, you know, they're non-believers. So they're not counted. Right? So there's the placement of it. All right? So there's a lot of conjecture that that's how it's going to work out. And if the Antichrist can pull that off, he will be able to pull it off. That's going to bring a lot of joy to a lot of people. It allows the Muslims to keep control of their area and give the Jews access to the mount. Okay? Make sense?
Yes.
I didn't hear any oohs or ahs.
This is so funny. I know you want to move on.
That's it. No, it's
If I
okay.
come back,
We have next week.
It'll be rare for me, but because of this. It's funny how God's plan is just gonna slap the unbelievers in the face. I mean, it's gonna be right there in their face. And they're gonna be right where they belong in the court of Gentiles. Does anybody know who T.H. Thomasian is?
Mhm.
He wrote the 100th anniversary to Darwin's Origin of Species.
Okay.
Great evolutionist, you know, stout unbeliever. But in that, his preface, he said this, that evolution was not a theory. It didn't meet the scientific requirements. And he said, we have climbed the mountains of ignorance, and when we got to the top, there was a band of theologians there. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a laugh. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to.
Yeah, and you know, your point about evolution is that wouldn't even come close to passing what you and I learned in, well, some of us junior high, some of us middle school, about the scientific method.
There you go.
It doesn't even meet the criteria for it.
Well, my
And
point
but I
is
will say
laughing.
this, that Darwin originally, he didn't say the theory of evolution.
No.
He didn't call it a theory. He just said the origin of the species. It was just his
Right,
idea
right.
of where everything came from. And they made it into a theory. But if it's theory, you don't teach it as fact. That's what the word theory means, is that it can be proven. So at any rate,
My
yes,
point was laughing at
Yes.
how God is I am the Alpha, and I'm the Omega.
right.
I have the first word and I have the last. And men can run their mouth in the interim with all their words, but God still's Alpha.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and I think this whole thing, piggybacking on what you said, this whole thing really kind of speaks to the audacity of sin.
Oh, yeah.
You would think out of all the people or all the beings in the world that would know better than to go up against God, it would be Satan, Lucifer. I mean, he was there. He was there in heaven. And like, this is God, for crying out loud.
Yes.
You know, I was created by him. And yet he has this audacity in his sin that he's going to beat him. And we do the same thing when we get into sin. We get this audacity of sin, we get away with it, we get away with it, we get away with it, we get away with it. And every time we get away with it, we push down a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And then one day we get caught in it, one way or the other, and we look at ourselves and go, how did I ever get to this point? It's that audacity of sin. We begin to think that we actually do know what's best and that we are God. Okay? And so again, I think that's one of the big points of Revelation here, is that this is God revealing you're not that big a deal. You know, I'm in control. Who has control of the world of the earth right now? Satan. This is Satan's got control of it. The whole point of Revelation is that because Christ paid the price, he's going to be given back the deed to the earth. And when we reach this point here, I think the very fact that what Satan does shows that he's getting desperate because he knows the end is coming. Okay? That was a good point. Thank you. All right. Verse 3. And I will grant authority to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. And if anyone wants to harm them, fire flows out of their mouth and devours their enemies. And so if anyone wants to harm them, he must be killed in this way. These have the power to shut up the sky so that rain will not fall during the days of prophesying, and they have power over the waters to turn them into blood and to strike the earth with every plague as often as they desire. Okay, now, we're done with the temple. Okay, now we're going to live in the streets. All right, and so we've got these 2 witnesses. And a lot of discussion about the 2 witnesses. Two witnesses. Okay? Now, they're described here as being the 2 olive trees, right? And 2 lampstands. And being a Jewish reader, we would have understood what this was talking about here. And this goes back to, hold on a second. Let me see, sorry. I had it written.
Zechariah 4.
Yes, thank you. Is that what your Bible says? Or I said that
That's
before.
what my notes say.
Oh, from the last time.
Right.
Zechariah 4, and I focused in on 11 through 14. And I didn't write it down. I didn't save it, I don't think. Let's see. No, I didn't. Yes, here it goes. Zechariah 4, 5 through 6, and 11 through 14. So the angel who was speaking with me answered, this is Elijah. I'm sorry, it's Zechariah. Speaking with me answered and said to me, do you not know what these are? And I said, no, my Lord. And then he said to me, this is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, saying, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord of armies. And so the lampstands are basically the Holy Spirit. It's the Spirit of God. All right? And you and I are to be lampstands. We're supposed to be the light to the world. Okay? And we do that through the power of the Holy Spirit. 11, then I said to him, what are these 2 olive trees on the right of the lampstand and on its left? And I responded the second time and said to him, what are the 2 olive branches which are beside the 2 golden pipes which empty the golden oil from themselves? So he answered me saying, do you not know what these are? And I said, no, my Lord. Then he said, these are the 2 anointed ones who are standing by the Lord of the whole earth. So these represent essentially testimony. Okay? So these are some theologians believe this is just symbolic. They say it's symbolic of what we got symbolic of. The law and the prophets. Some believe it's symbolic of the church. And these just 2 represent the church. Okay? But you have to believe the church is still there for them to say that they're representing the church, right? But there's no reason for us to believe that they are anything but 2 people. All right, now the fun part comes with, who are these 2 people? And here's a picture of what we have here. The olive trees, you can see that the 2 witnesses are kind of built into the olive trees. And the idea here, the picture here was that these olive trees were connected to the lampstands. So there was, the idea here is that they're continual. That's why I put up there on that continual anointing, was that these witnesses will be constantly filled with the Holy Spirit. There's not, you don't have to stop and then go fill it back up. It's constant. Okay? Now the 2 witnesses, and the reason that I say 2 witnesses are 2 people is because the Greek word for that is, for the witness is martus, which is the same word we have for martyr. Okay? So an idea can't be a martyr. I mean, we don't talk about ideas being martyred. It's people. Okay? So our question is, okay, so who are these 2 people? Well, there's a number of people in the running. Some say one of them's Jesus. Some say it's Moses. Some say Elijah. And then Enoch is in there. Some even think it's Noah. Okay? Here's what I think. I think it's Moses and Elijah. And here's why. When you look at Moses and you look at Elijah, they had similar ministries to the 2 witnesses. Okay? Also, fire was also used to defeat their enemies. If you remember the story, and to be honest with you, I didn't really remember it until I read it. Elijah's sitting there, and the king sends 25 guys to get him. And he's sitting on top of a hill, and they said, you come on down here. And Elijah said, well, if I want you to die, then God will send fire. Well, fire sent and 25 guys are killed. So then the king sends 50 guys. Same thing happens again. So this idea that the fire is connected with both of these, and Moses had the same situation with the fire destroying his enemies. Okay, so they have that in common. They also appeared at the Transfiguration. Okay, so they have that in common with each other. All right, so I want you to read that verse 6. It says, these have the power to what? Shut up the sky. Elijah was able to cause drought. Okay. Did Moses cause a drought? And the plagues?
Yes. And blood.
Yes. And then we go on to say they have power over the waters to turn them into blood. Moses did that. Strike the earth with every plague. Moses did that. Okay. So what we're seeing here is that these guys have done this before. Now, a lot of people would say that it would be Enoch and Elijah because neither one of them died. They were both taken up into heaven. And the verse that they use to support these two is Hebrews, I think it's 9:27. It says where it's appointed to every man to die once. And that's the argument they use. Since these guys didn't die, they have to die, because that's the law that God made. But if you look at the section here in Hebrews, it's not really about the idea of every man having to die. It's about Jesus having to die just once for everybody. So it's not, they're kind of taking that verse out of context and saying that God has made this law, when in reality, it's just, it's a general statement. It's not a hard and fast rule that everyone has to die. Okay, that's the argument against Elijah and Enoch, is that this verse really doesn't pertain to the fact that everybody has to die. Okay? You're giving me a look like.
Now, I'm just wondering, it's just, I have a lot of questions, which I'm sorry, I know we
It's
don't
okay,
have a whole lot
that's
of time. But,
Church doesn't start till 11.
that's right. So, is there any reason, I'm just wondering, so they do believe that it has to be one of the past prophets? It couldn't be
Yes,
new
and here's the reason
individuals?
why.
Okay,
Is that who are they ministering to?
okay.
They're preaching to Jews. Okay? They're not, the rest of the world will hear it because it's going to be on CNN and MSNBC and Fox.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to hear it, but they're there to minister to the Jews. And there's a verse, where's that verse? There's a verse where it talks about Elijah. It's in Malachi. And in Malachi, it says that Elijah will come back at the end of time to basically bring father and son back together. So it's connecting, bringing Israel back. So that's another verse used for why Elijah is one. Now, obviously, I could be totally wrong about this. There's no names given, and so really, maybe there's not even a need for us to worry about who these guys are. It's just a fun postulation. Bert?
Just something I was gonna throw in there, I thought it might be an interesting nugget with the whole Moses, is in Jude.
Yes.
It talks about Michael and Satan having a standoff at Moses' grave. I was like, why in the world does a grave need a bodyguard? Maybe there was something more to the story there.
Bert, you just continue to impress me every single week. Because that's exactly one of the reasons that Moses is that verse in that section in Jude, where it talks about God has a special plan for Moses. Moses isn't done yet. Remember, Moses never made it to the promised land.
Right.
Now, he died, but he didn't make it to the promised land. And so in Jude, we do read that so there are a lot of people believe that Moses will be one of the ones because that is what his calling is going to be. And you think about, in the New Testament, who do they always quote when they're attacking Jesus? Moses. Moses was a big dude in the Jewish faith. He took him out of Egypt. Okay? Moses and Abraham. So, that's a great, I'm glad you brought that up because I'd totally forgotten about that reference. So that's another reason why Moses and Elijah appear to be really good candidates for this. Okay? It could be Mike and me,
Yeah.
I think we could pull off sackcloth, don't you? So anyway, and then again, talking about the sackcloth, that's typically what prophets wore, because their message was one of judgment and death, and so they were in mourning. Sackcloth represented mourning, and if you ever worn a burlap anything, that's kind of what sackcloth is. Not really comfortable. Not really comfortable. They're going to be in it for 3.5 years, okay, or 42 months, or anyway. So that's the argument for those two guys being chosen, and it makes sense to me. I can't come up with an argument against it. But again, there are theologians who believe it's symbolic. It's not the real thing. In fact, I found one last night, And, he talked about how, he had two olive trees, and then the menorahs, and that, the one on the left, the menorah here represented the old covenant, the one over here represented the new covenant, and that these two olive trees were the messages that were given by both of those covenants. That could be a layer of meaning here. And it's a chiasm. Did you notice that was a chiasm? Tree, menorah, tree. Anyway, so that's another possibility. But there are people there are theologians who believe this is just simply symbolic, that there are not two actual men who will do this. It's the Word of God or whatever. And I just don't think that holds water when you start looking at what's going to happen to these guys. It just doesn't make sense to me. Okay? Wow. We're done for today. We got through what? Well, we got through 5 verses, 6 verses, 6 verses.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
I'd just like to add a couple of little things
Add
about
away.
the temple. I heard from someone a couple years ago that Israel is doing a major infrastructure deal because I believe their airport is in Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
To build a fast track rail system from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, with the Temple Mount being
The station.
stop. Yeah, station on that. And his supposition was they're expecting to eventually build that temple, and they're going to have mass tourism
And
coming through there.
yes, and that brings up something I had totally forgot to, well, I can't tell you everything, just because my brain is so small. Essentially, the temple is going to be a prefab building. They've already got a lot of the pieces constructed. All it's gonna be is a matter of them taking cranes and putting those pieces in place, and boom, the temple's up. They've already got the menorah built. It's on display. When you go to Jerusalem, you can see it. It's made of 97 pounds of pure gold. Okay, so that thing's gonna be big and it's heavy. So they've got that taken care of. I mean, there's a group called the Temple Mount something. Foundation, Temple Mount, and they're already training young men to be priests. So that when this temple's built, boom, they've got priests ready to go. I mean, they're all ready to be starting. They've got the red heifers that they need. I mean, they've got, so they've got everything in place. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
And, go ahead, Bert.
Oh, I just heard the one estimate I heard with all of that is that they could probably, if they got the go-ahead, get it erected in a year.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be
So
surprised.
if this verse is taking place at the midpoint of a 7-year period,
Yeah, well, and think about,
everyone